Nobody invented school. Every classroom, every desk in a row, every bell that tells you when to stop thinking about one subject and start thinking about another traces back to a series of accidents made by people solving completely different problems. 1.5 billion students sit in classrooms right now, none of them designed for what you think they were designed for. The people who built the first schools were not trying to educate anyone, they were trying to count grain. 3400 BC, southern Mesopotamia, the city of Uruk. There was no alphabet yet, no concept of literature, no idea that writing could tell a story. Temple administrators had a much smaller problem. Too much barley, too many sheep, and no way to remember who owed what. They pressed marks into wet clay with a cut reed, numbers of goats, amounts of grain, debts. This was not education, this was bookkeeping. But the marks were useless if only the person who made them could read them. Someone else had to be able to look at the tablet and know what it meant. That required training, not philosophy, not literacy for its own sake, quality control for tax records. The Sumerians built a building for this. They called it the Eduba, the tablet house. Boys, almost always sons of scribes and officials, sat in rows and copied the same lists over and over. Grain totals, sheep counts, standard phrases. Archaeologists have recovered thousands of these practice tablets, and they are almost all identical, the same lines copied by hundreds of different children across hundreds of years. This was not a school built to create thinkers. It was a factory built to create scribes who made zero errors on a tax ledger. The world's first classroom existed to prevent accounting mistakes. The scribes it produced became powerful. They were the only people who could read the laws, the debts, the contracts. And once a class of literate administrators exists, it needs a way to reproduce itself. The Adaba could not stay a training ground for accountants forever. Fast forward to ancient Greece. Wealthy Athenian families had a different problem. Someone had to walk the children to and from their lessons, carry their supplies, and keep them from getting into trouble in the street. This job went to a household slave, usually one considered too old or unfit for hard labor. He was called the paidagogos, literally the one who leads the child. His job was not to teach anything, it was supervision and transport. Over time, the paidagogos started sitting in on the lessons himself, correcting manners, drilling recitation, making sure the boy behaved in front of the actual tutor. The word paidagogos is where we get pedagogy, the entire modern theory of how teaching should work. An entire academic discipline is named after a babysitting job that was never meant to involve teaching at all. Move forward again, medieval Europe. The Catholic Church had a problem that had nothing to do with children. Religious texts had to be copied by hand, and only monks who could read Latin could copy them accurately. Monasteries needed literate monks the same way Uruk needed literate scribes, not to spread knowledge, but to keep the copying pipeline from breaking down. Cathedral schools and monastic schools were built to manufacture clergy who could read scripture and copy manuscripts without corrupting the text. Educating the general public was not the goal. It was, for centuries, actively discouraged. Literacy was a professional tool for a narrow religious class, guarded the way a trade secret is guarded. For over 1,000 years, that is what school meant. Small, elite, built to produce a specific kind of worker, a scribe, a clerk, a monk. Then a problem showed up that had nothing to do with religion or bookkeeping. It showed up in a factory. The Industrial Revolution needed something no civilization had ever needed before, a massive number of people who could show up at the same time, follow a strict schedule, and perform repetitive tasks without failing apart. Farms did not run on a clock. Factories did. A late worker on a farm cost you an hour. A late worker on an assembly line stopped the entire line. Prussia, in the early 1800s, built the first true mass education system, and it was explicitly modeled on producing obedient, punctual, literate soldiers and factory workers for the state. Age-based grade levels, fixed class periods, a bell that ends one activity and starts another, whether you are finished or not. This was not designed by philosophers debating how children learn best. It was designed by a government that needed a predictable, standardized population. American reformer Horace Mann visited Prussia in 1843, studied their system, and brought it home almost unchanged. Rows of desks facing forward. One teacher lecturing to dozens of students at once. Ringing bells. Age-segregated classrooms. He called it the Common School, and it spread across the United States as the template for public education. The goal, stated at the time, was explicit: literate, obedient, punctual citizens who could staff the new industrial economy. Every part of that system was a factory solution wearing an education costume. Rows of desks were not chosen because they help you learn. They were chosen because they were the same layout used to supervise workers on a production floor. The bell was not chosen because 45 minutes is the ideal length for understanding a subject. It was chosen because factories ran on shift bells, and children needed to be trained early to respond to one. That structure is still standing. The bell, the rows, the grade levels sorted strictly by age, the class period that ends at a fixed time whether or not the lesson is finished, all of it inherited, almost unchanged, from a 19th century factory training system built for a labor economy that no longer exists. Most students sitting in a classroom today have no idea they are sitting inside the ghost of a Prussian industrial training program. School was never invented. It was assembled, piece by piece, out of an accounting problem, a babysitting job, a manuscript copying crisis, and a factory's need for punctual labor. Nobody sat down and designed the best way to teach a child. Somebody just kept solving a different problem, and the solution got stuck to the next one. And somewhere in a Prussian factory town, a bell rang, and it never really stopped ringing. Click here: How Humans Accidentally Created Money.